And after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. All right, so if you read this verse by itself, I didn't read the rest of the letter, you can kind of hear it being like a generic promise. Like every time you have suffering, you're going to get through it, and these 4 things will happen to you. Peter knows not everyone physically escapes the suffering. And eventually, within a couple of years, Peter himself physically does not escape the suffering. He's martyred on a cross, upside down. By this time in his ministry, he's probably had his friend Paul killed, who didn't physically escape martyring. James also did not escape the suffering by this time. So he's not writing a promise, little jingle of like, hey, boys and girls, just hang in there. You know, after a little suffering, whoop, it all comes better, and then you die a happy life like in a Roman retirement facility. It's not a promise saying that, okay? But it is a stone-cold set of promises about suffering. So number one, it's not a specific promise that these people won't die at the hand of suffering. But it is a progression here, a very, very impressive progression that's a promise to you. And I will just say during the singing time, I was blessed because, as I told you, I was praying that God would just make his power evident, because that's what this passage is about. He powerfully calls us into his glory. He powerfully heals our hearts. And as I was singing, because I know some of your stories fairly well, I saw what causes my heart to give thanks to God that he has done exactly what he promises in his text. So here's his text. This is all verse 10. After you suffer a little while. Little suffering. There's a ratio being put out here. Little suffering, few sufferings, literally is what it says, equates in 4 things. Boom, 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 boom. Mending, supporting, strengthening, bolstering. My words. In a text of EFC, great, the words are these: restores, confirms, strengthens, establishes. There's a ratio. And it's kind of pointed out this way. Little suffering endured. So when you hit suffering, why do you hit suffering? Because Satan is roaming around this world like a roaring lion trying to eat faith. And so when it comes in on you and your faith is challenged, that's the hands of people talking smack, trying to hurt you, doing whatever, or outside things that he might be bringing into you. Through little sufferings, God then promises he'll do 4 things in your life. And it's a sequence. Picture this way. It's a tent, right? You rip a tent. And these 4 words are this, like literally mending, supporting, strengthening, and establishing. So it's as if there's a rip in a garment, and the mending is sewing it, and then there's some support pieces put across it. And then the whole thing is patched over with strengthening. And the whole thing is riveted back into the canvas, is the picture. It's a building picture of like, you know, here's the cool thing. When you suffer, every time you suffer with the Lord and you endure it as God has taught us to, and he did in this text in 1 Peter. And if you haven't caught it, talks about Jesus suffered and endured it, and he told us exactly how he did it. It's this really cool word called entrusting. He looked to God and continually entrusted himself through it. So as Jesus is walking down the road to the cross, he's entrusting himself. Father, Father, Father. His prayer life is uniquely repetitious because he gets to the bottom of it saying, God, you got to help me. God, you got to help me. God, you got to help me. If there's any way, let there be some other way, but God, you got to help me. Continually making a transaction with his Father saying, you've got to take care of me. You've got to take care of me. You've got to take care of me. Continual entrustment. That's how you do it. You don't just memorize a jingle and just march into it and endure it by yourself. He wants to endure it with you, provide strength with you so that as you do it, not only do you endure, but you endure uniquely through his strengthening. So he taught us how to do that. But what is the fruit that happens? This is just something that the Spirit is saying through Peter to them, is that when you endure those sufferings, that these 4 things happen to you. And not only they happen to you, they divinely happen at God's hand. So that's where like these gatherings and this whole Christianity stuff, it's a bunch of hogwash, or else it's a complete life changer. When we went to Christmas, we talked about coming to Jesus, and Jesus says, you cast your burdens upon me, and I do this unique thing, right? A peace that passes all understanding guards your hearts and minds. Well, everyone knows Oprah says that if you distract yourself, you feel a little bit better on things, right? If you really get it off your chest, right? Hit that punching bag and say those words like, feel that release. It's not that type of peace. And according to the famous theologian Kelly Clarkson, who sings that song, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Sure, but that is not what this is talking about. I like that song. That's not what this is talking about. This is talking about, sure, you endure it and you encounter some natural strength, but God is saying that he himself will do a divine, unique work of mending, bolstering, strengthening, and establishing you, different than the stuff Kelly's talking about. Different. So, you know what? To the outside world, it can look like, Christians get a lot of benefit because they have this release thing. They release it. I release it to a tree, and I feel better or whatever. But the Christians, they release it to this Jesus, and then they endure this. And so, their lives feel better because they are generally loving to people, sometimes, hopefully. And they are more at peace because they transfer this off. They have a release of those things. And then they are strong because they endure, but it's all like natural cause and effect. Absolutely opposite of what God himself is promising you for you in your life. You are not supposed to experience peace and strengthening just like everyone else does when they do the natural replacement therapy. God himself, the one who has saved you, the one who will bring you to his glory, he will visit you in your life through the power of his Spirit, and he will give you unique supernatural peace. And he will give you supernatural mending of your heart and bolstering and strengthening and make you strong with the strength of God, not the strength of flesh. That's what his promise is. So it's either 100% truth or else it's junk. And if it's junk, we got a lot better things to do on Sunday morning and better things to do with our money and better ways, because if this is not real, we of all men are most to be pitied. Because this great Jesus said, I'm worth it, I'm worth laying down your life to follow me. And I believe him. Speaks to the soul, I believe him. So this is this beautiful promise that if you encounter it, and you will, that through little sufferings, it's a beautiful ratio. Pay a little bit of suffering, get a whole lot of benefit. Now, don't go looking for the suffering. You'll encounter plenty enough as it is, okay? But as we sang back there, I know it's true. I know some of you guys have suffered, and I've seen God give you far more strength than you have suffered. You've tasted this divine ratio. And some of you guys have suffered a little bit and been given a lot of strength, and some of you guys have suffered massively. And the result of that is true. Your hearts are massively and strongly turned towards the Lord. Some of you guys have suffered the loss of people that you love. Some of you guys have been assaulted. Some of you guys have been raped. Some of you guys have been robbed. And for those of you guys that have endured it, like God has enabled us to endure it, where you've continually trusted the Lord, kept coming back saying, God, you got to help me, God, help me, God, help me, God, help me. And you didn't keep trusting the bottle or this or that, or just distracting yourself or whatever, or over binging on this or that, but you kept coming back to him. You are receiving, and I've seen you receive, the supernatural strengthening of the Father, because the strength that's in you doesn't just happen to anybody. It's unique. So, and the highest expression of it is, to me, well, not high. It's really high, though. I don't want to say highest. Is when we're back there singing songs. I see you singing with delight to the God who has done this for you. Your heart loves him. You trust him more than you've ever trusted him before. Your heart is delighted to him. That's why you sing with a heart that really means it more than you ever met before. That's why you don't care who's around you when you're singing. You'll lift your hand and you'll sing out loud, those kind of things, because he is real and he has mended your heart in a way that only he does. It's a beautiful thing. All right?